Oh, sorry, just making sure it records. Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for speaking with me.
Oh, thank you for doing this.
Yes, this was so much fun. It was educational, it was dramatic, and it had so many different layers. I forgot, it didn't feel like a documentary. It just felt like
Yeah.
I was just right there enjoying the whales and just learning.
Awesome. Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. Thank you so much.
Yes. Now, this was 3 years of filming, and
Yeah.
it took place in New Zealand and Antarctica, where we follow the different pods. My question to you is, how do you find the location, and more importantly, how do you know which pods to follow?
Well, so yes, it was 3 years of field work, and it was 24 locations
Which
worldwide. We went from the equator to the poles, covering 5 different species of whales. So orca, beluga whales, narwhals, sperm whales, and humpbacks, and trying to see them through the lens of culture. And when I created Secrets of the Whales, I had done years of research because I love this idea of whale culture, the fact that they are doing things much like humans, that they pass on these ancestral traditions. And what I'm building this story on is a foundation of science. So I'm talking to scientists who have dedicated their lives to understanding these animals. And in terms of how to follow the individual families or pods, you don't really know what you're going to get. I mean, you could go to a place and never even see a whale. You don't have full predictability on that. So it's working with the researchers, trying to narrow down the odds, saying that if you come at this time of year and you give yourself a month, maybe we'll get lucky and see these things, but you can never be guaranteed.
Right. Now, also, is the purpose to kind of dispel certain myths, or is it just to observe?
Well, I think it's maybe not even dispelling myths as much as it is expanding our view.
Mhm.
So, I think so often we have looked at animals, and whales, of course, included, very clinically. We look at it from a distance and we say, well, isn't that interesting? They do this and they do that. But what science is revealing in more recent times with whales is that, like humans, within a genetically identical species, they are doing things differently. So my friend Shane Garrow, who's a whale scientist, he says the difference between behavior and culture is this: that behavior is what we do, culture is how we do it. So most humans, for example, eat food with utensils. That's behavior. But whether you use a knife and fork or chopsticks is culture.
Hmm.
And the whales are doing the same thing. So the orcas that live in New Zealand, they like to eat stingrays. That is their ethnic food that they like. And they've figured out how to catch and eat them. And they're the only ones in the world that do it quite like that. The orca in the Norwegian Arctic like to eat fish, herring, and they figured out how to catch them there. The ones in Patagonia like to eat seals. They figured out that. So same species, just like humans, but the French like their crepes and their croissants, and the Irish like bangers and mash or something. So it's cultural, and they're passing that knowledge onto their children, onto their offspring. Not only the skills they need to survive, but their ancestral tradition. So I think that's the message here. So it's really in expanding our view
Mhm.
of these animals and seeing the ocean and our planet through the lens of animal culture.
Right. And what was really interesting, I loved, was that every pod or every species of different animal has their own version of hunting.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I was wondering, do you feel that you said that that's also knowledge that's passed down with the ever changing climate change and everything else involved? Are they able to kind of adapt quickly to their environment?
Boy, that's a great question. And I think it depends. In general, Dana, they can. I think
Mhm.
some whales, I think orca have the capability of doing that. I'm not sure that other whales do. Sperm whales, biggest brain on the planet, but they are highly focused on eating squid. So if the squid all disappeared, I don't know if they would be able to adapt and change their diet to something else. But even with the orca, we didn't show this specific thing in the film, but the orca that live in the Pacific Northwest of the United States and Canada, British Columbia area, for example, there are families of orca there that their culture is to eat salmon. They love to eat salmon. Now, orca could change and feed on something else, but they are so culturally tied to eating salmon that when salmon are no longer available because they put dams in the rivers and the salmon are no longer abundant, those orca will actually starve to death rather than change their culture and go eat something else.
Wow.
So I think, the question is a good one, and we don't really know the full breadth of the answer there, because even though orca could change, in some cases they choose not to, and other species maybe are incapable of changing. So it's a great question. We don't necessarily know the answer, but I guess we'll see, hopefully in a good way.
Right. Now, also, you're a photojournalist as well, award-winning photojournalist. I love that part when you was taking the picture of the stingray and they was getting how they captured it. That was beautiful. What have you learned as a photojournalist that you would say has kind of changed you also as an observer of these animals and these creatures?
Well, I would say that what I've learned broadly after 4 decades of exploring the ocean and telling stories about it is that everything is connected. Everything in the ocean is connected, and we are connected to the ocean. Every other breath that you and I are taking right now comes from the sea. More than 50% of the oxygen we all breathe is generated by the ocean, and therefore it's in our best interest to explore and protect this ocean planet that we live on. I think in terms of the whales, for example, the things that I have learned is that they are a lot like us, that they mirror, or we mirror, their cultures in the sense that they celebrate identity. They celebrate where they come from. Sperm whales, when they meet another sperm whale in the ocean, they say where they're from. They say, I am from Dominica. They care. They celebrate their children. They show grief. They make time for each other every day. Sperm whales spend most of their days in the deep ocean looking for squid, and life in the ocean is hard. And yet every day or every couple of days, they make time to come together and reaffirm those social bonds. They rub around together, they socialize, they gently play with each other. They close their eyes in pure joy and bliss. And I think, in our lives, we get so busy sometimes that we forget about it. We're so driven by work and, putting food on the table. But the ocean is a tough place to live too, and yet they still make time for each other. They haven't forgotten the importance of those connections to one another. And I think that's what I was reminded of. It's not a revelation in the sense that I already knew that, but I needed to be reminded of that from the whales.
Right. So for every time that you go and observe, say, a different species, is the goal for you to just learn something about, or to just kind of reaffirm, as you were saying?
No, I think it's a little of both. It's a good question. I do my research, I do my homework, I try to have a sense of what I'm hoping to see, but I completely leave myself open to serendipity. I mean, I may go in with some preconceived notions that get shattered, and I see things very differently. I've learned that animals have personality. Some are a little more bold, some are more feisty, others are shy. These are things that science wouldn't have given credibility to a few decades ago, but today we recognize. So I think our view of the natural world and animals is changing and evolving, and we need to be open to all those possibilities.
Right. Now, for the average citizen who watches this and they think, what can I do to help? Do you have a message out there for them?
I do. The ocean is dying a death from 1,000 cuts. We've taken 90% of the big fish out of the ocean. We dump 18 billion pounds of plastic into the ocean every year. We're dumping so much carbon into the atmosphere that the ocean's chemistry is turning to acid. So what we can do is be more informed and perhaps better consumers. We can make decisions about the things we buy, the things we eat. There are better choices of seafood that you could buy. You could choose perhaps not to eat red meat because of its big, global footprint in climate. We can elect leaders who believe in science and conservation and who want to protect this planet for our children and the next generation. So I think the more knowledge we have, the better decisions we can make about consumerism and about politics and civility and all of these things. And those are not small things. If everybody decided to stop using single-use plastic containers, maybe we wouldn't be dumping 18 billion pounds of plastic into the ocean every year. And that makes a difference. So yeah, being a good citizen and consumer is important.
Right. And what would you say have been the greatest lesson that you learned through this journey of doing Secret of the Whales?
That we're not alone, that there are other alien species among us that celebrate things that we do too. They cherish each other, they cherish their families, they have cultures that matter to them. And we are ultimately affecting how they live. And maybe we can change our behavior to make this planet function in harmony the way it was designed.
Right. And lastly, if you could describe this series just using 3 words, what would you say?
Celebrating whales through culture. 4 words.
Very good. I'll accept it. That's great.
All right.
Thank you so much for speaking with me.
Thank you. Great questions. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you.